I started this podcast because I'm fascinated by how we get better at bridge, how we reach that next level. I'm talking with expert players about how they got where they are and what they do to continue honing their skills, to less experienced players about what they're doing to improve their game, and to experts in fields outside of bridge, like learning and expertise. If you're looking to level up your game, check out my classes on Learn Bridge Online. Mondays are about the expert thought process, and Thursdays are about declare or play. You can attend the classes live or you can watch the recorded replay. I'm looking forward to leveling up together. I'm joined this week by Marty Fleisher. Marty, thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm very happy to be asked.
So tell me how you learn bridge.
So, when I was 8, my father decided that he wants to learn bridge so that he would have something to do with my mother when he retired. She knew how to play bridge from college. He decided he would ask my uncle, my mother's brother, to teach him. Uh, and I said, I want to learn too. And that's how it started. And my uncle was a talented player, a club player, who knew how to play. And so that's how it happened.
And then you ended up taking time off from bridge as your law career happened, right?
I mean, a lot of time. In fact, I would say from the time I started college when I was 18 until I was in my late 30s, I played very little. I played a lot in junior high school and high school, but I studied a lot in college, even though I did go to college with my high school bridge partner. And I don't know, I didn't go to tournaments then. I was in law school and I didn't go to tournaments. Bridge was not really part of my life much. I used to play in about one regional a year, and there were many years in which I earned under 100 master points.
What got you excited about it again?
When I was in my middle 30s, I pivoted in my law career and I started to work for myself instead of a big law firm. And so I had some more free time and I thought I wanted to take it up again, but I never thought I'd be really serious about it.
Rusty were you?
Rusty, but I was still reading the Bridge World. I was reading the Bulletin. I would read Bridge books occasionally. So I wasn't really in touch with people who were serious players, but I was sort of following the game.
So at the time you started playing again, let's say you were 40,
40, right?
right? You had basically 10 years of bridge, like serious bridge playing in you from that 8 to 18
Right.
point,
That's
right?
right.
How do you think it would have been different if instead you had just taken the game up at 30?
Well, I think it'd have been almost impossible. I mean, I think I could have been a reasonable player, but one thing that we know is that you have to start young if you want to be a top player. I believe that everyone who you would consider a top player in the entire world started under age 20, except for Zia. So, I mean, uh, I don't know exactly why that's true, but there's a lot of really smart people out there who have tried to learn bridge and who have done okay learning it in their 30s and 40s or 50s, but none of them have become what you would remotely call one of the world's best players. I think it's just too hard to do.
I agree. I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is about that. If it's like the elasticity of the young brain, or if it's just the hours that you
No, I
need.
don't think it's the hours. I'm sure it has to do with something like the young brain. Because, like, there's too many people who took it up in a very serious way, let's say in their 40s and 50s, with enormous amounts of effort. The best teachers. And also, these are people who have picked up in life how you can learn things, who went to college, who went to graduate school, who did whatever they did. It's not like someone who's 8 who doesn't know any of those things. But nevertheless, learning things when you're 8 is just much, much easier.
What differentiates those people who learned early, become world class? Like, as bridge players, how do you see that manifest?
I think that when you learn young, some things just become automatic and they're built into your brain, as opposed to having to spend mental energy working it out. I have a little story about a very accomplished person who learned bridge relatively late in life, and they were talking about a hand in which they had gone down when they had a ace jack 10 and dummy opposite the singleton queen in their hand, and they had to take two tricks without losing any, and the person who was behind the ace jack 10 had overcalled in the suit. They just finessed into that person. So somebody said, I don't think it was me in this conversation, well, why didn't you just take a roughing finesse? And this person said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you could have just played the queen to the ace and run the jack. I said, oh, I didn't see that. If there had been ace, queen, jack, and dummy opposites, I would have seen it immediately. Now, I think that thing to almost any player who learned young is just absolutely obvious. But I think there's a whole range of things like that, which is when you learn them later, it's just hard to see. And when there's a combination of things that are hard to see or hard to do in the course of a day of bridge or a week of bridge, you just don't have the ability to just do things like that automatically.
And then the group that did learn early, who are
Right.
at the top,
Right.
there's a handful who are at the tippy top, right? And we kind of all know who they are. What do you think differentiates them from you?
Having stopped playing for, let's say, 20 years, I lost any chance of being like them. But
Yeah.
some of those players just have abilities, like in anything, which are just incredibly rare. I tell a story that there was one year that Michael Camlin and I won the award for the best defended hand. In the same year, at the little presentation, they gave Helgamo the award for the best played hand. I can barely understand what he did in that hand. And I've seen all four hands and have looked at it multiple times. I mean, his mind just works at a different level. I think that there are just extraordinary innate abilities
I
too.
agree. There's something about the Helgamos and the Madalas and stuff that we're mortals. But there's lots of other people who learn bridge as kids who don't get to the world class level. So what do you think differentiates you from me?
I got to the world class level in a very unusual way, having taken all this time off. So I think I was able to get there by being around a lot of good players who I tried to learn things from, particularly Chip Martell, who I'd become friends with before really taking a bridge again really seriously. But I'm a naturally good student, which I think helped to get a lot better between 38 and 65 or whatever it was. I think if you're not a good student, I think it's even harder to learn those things later in life. I'm the sort of guy, I read every bridge book. I've read them again. I've talked about the hands with people. And there are players who are way better than I am who have almost never read a bridge book.
Crazy to me. Yeah, I was just talking to Brad Moss, your teammate.
Right?
Never read a bridge book.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
And I don't see how it's possible he can play so well because there are so many positions that I've seen in books, which, I mean, I'm not sure he's ever seen at the table.
Yeah. I tried to get him to tell me how he learned technical things like squeezes, and he couldn't explain it to me. But I guess he just like figured it out.
I think that's right. And I guess he can just do that. I remember a hand that I defended at the club when I was 15 years old, 14 years old, and dummy had 10-8 third of a suit, and I had queen 9 third behind the dummy, and I had to attack the suit, and so I led the queen. And Claire played the king, ace, started to play the low from ace jack fourth. He played the 8, I won the 9, and I played it back. And Claire said, like, how did you ever think of that? And I said, well, it's just in a Kelsey book. I didn't think of it. I'm sure I never would have thought of it. It was just that it's in a book, so I remembered it. So, I mean, unfortunately, those hands come up less often than I would have thought when I was 15. I was convinced that you'd play a session of bridge, and there were like 2 or 3 of those.
So you said you were a good student.
Right.
What did that look like when you came back to the game at 38?
I asked a lot of questions and I listened to the answer. Maybe I thought it was wrong and I'd go ask somebody else. But I mean, I've seen over and over people come up to some of the great players of the world, Bobby Levin, Eric Rodwell, and ask them about some hand. And when they give the answer, start to argue with them. It's like, what is the point? I mean, they're being nice enough to help you out. They don't really want to listen to you try to convince them that you know more than they do.
Yeah.
So anyway, I became friends with a bunch of these players, and they all taught me a lot. And to some degree, they taught me different things. And I think I was good at picking up what each player was good at. So, I learned things from Zia, let's say, that I probably couldn't learn from Michael Rosenberg and vice versa.
What were some of the books that were really life changing for you?
I mean, I would say all the Kelsey books. I mean, all the books from the 70s or the late 60s, which I read on bidding, are pretty worthless because nobody knew how to bid. All the card play books, I mean, the defense books, the problems are a little harder because this signaling wasn't modern, but I think that's okay. The declare play books are all the techniques that everyone has to know. I mean, if you could just play as well as the hands in those Kelsey books from the beginning of the chapter to the middle or the top two-thirds, you'd be playing at a world-class level. You don't even have to solve the problems at the end of the chapter. And that's why, like, I do believe in this Michael Rosenberg thing. Everybody is terrible because people, even the top players, just screw up the hands. They're just in those Kelsey books. I mean, I certainly do it. I'm not saying I'm immune by any means. Just counting the defender shape, counting declares tricks, what's happening here, and why is he playing this way? I mean, all of that is what you need to do to become an expert card player, and they're all there. I mean, I'm not sure I'd play the cards any better now than I played them when I was 16. I mean, I thought faster then, and everything came more easily. Sure, I've seen more positions, and I certainly have a better idea about what opening leads people might make against me, or who would duck in certain positions and stuff like that. But it's all basically there, in this sort of intermediate card play books.
So, in what ways are you better today than you were at 16?
Well, a huge amount of bidding has been learned by everyone, and I've basically learned a lot of that from people. So, I mean, I think there are very few people who can really become really expert bidders and not having anyone teach them things. I think that there are few real savants, but I think that bidding is much harder to learn just on your own. There are no, I mean, hardly any real books on it. Like the Larry Cohn book on the law of total tricks, a couple of other things. But I think on the whole, I mean, people like me at least have to be taught it. And so I learned it mostly from Chip Martell, who I think knows more about bidding than anybody. Zia and Michael Rosenberg and Chris Palankin, I've really been around a lot of the great bidders.
What do you think differentiates the great bidders from the mediocre ones at the world class level?
There's so much to bidding, and I'm not sure that the great constructive bidders are the same as the great competitive bidders. I mean, constructive bidding is really sort of an application often of what I call like raw computing power. Just trying to remember your system, construct hands for partner, think about what the most likely contract is, how the play will go in that contract if you're talking about the slam bidding. But in competitive bidding, you're trying also to guess what the opponents have, what they would do with such and such. How much would they bid if they were 5-5 versus 5-4? It's a huge array of things. And I think you just have to play a lot and see a lot of hands and go over a lot of hands before you can really do that well. I also think in terms of constructive bidding, I mean, I'm not one of these people who believe that you have to have a 300-page bidding system, but whatever you play, you really have to know it well. Because if a hand comes up for your system that's good and you remember it, often it's still a push, or you reach 100% contract instead of an 80% one, and your expectation is an imp or two. But if you foul up your system, your expectation is often like negative 10 imps.
Mm.
So I think that knowing what you play is way more important than playing the best thing.
How long are your notes with Chip?
They're about 85 or 90 pages. I think it's enough, particularly since we really study them a lot before the tournament. I mean, I know people who say that they read their notes on the plane, and I've been reading them for like 2 weeks before that. People really have 300 pages of notes. I mean, maybe one or two pairs who have that many pages actually know them, but it's very hard to do that. I mean, it's hard enough to do 80 or 90 pages.
Do they include things like two clubs is stamen?
Yeah,
Yeah. And over
yeah,
that, two diamonds is no major?
yeah.
Okay.
I know that seems silly, and I'm thinking now when you ask me, do we really have that? But yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I have it in there too, and it's, part of the 85 pages, but it's just interesting, like, what people think are necessary. Talking with Brian Platnick, one of his things was if it's an agreement, it has to be written down. It doesn't matter how standard you think it is. If it's an agreement, you need it written down.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I also think it really helps to understand the M scale. And I'm always shocked at some really top players who don't understand it, like the value of over tricks and under tricks. Obviously everybody knows that bidding a non-vulnerable game isn't as valuable as bidding a vulnerable game at IMS, but a lot of people don't seem to bid like that. People play match points as though it were imps, and once again, strained to big games or not. And even, I mean, for instance, the importance of becoming the declarer side at nobody vulnerable. Sure, everybody probably has a general idea that's true, but not as much as they should. Or I'll give you another example. Dummy comes down and you're in four of a major and you've missed a cold slam. It's just obvious. Either you or your partner or both have screwed up. Okay. But what should you think about doing? Your first thought after you realize this?
I mean, is there a way slam could be going down?
No,
Is that no?
no.
No? Okay. Oh, it should be if they're getting 1430 or if they're getting 1460, what's the imp difference? If I get 680,
Yes. You should think about making seven because if they only make 1430, you'll lose one fewer imp. Now, I learned that. I'm sure that there was someone who realized it themselves, but I mean, I had to learn it.
I just learned it. Yeah. So, what edge do you think that gives you just knowing the imp scale really well?
I think that there are competitive auctions in which you can really figure out that bidding on is really the percentage thing to do or is not the percentage thing to do, even if doing it is substantially less than 50%.
So, are these things that you've just kind of memorized, or you're sitting at the table like, should I bid three clubs? Let's see, that would be 110 versus, and like that would be three imps away versus winning two.
I don't think I do that computation at the table on a regular basis, but I think I now have a feel for when I'm supposed to do it and not.
And did that feel come from just experience and talking to people and like
Yes, and
who told you this? This is the
yes,
first I've ever. It was Chip.
it's one of the things that SIP really emphasizes. Like another thing which I've learned here, I'll give you another example, is in slam auctions, the difference between making a slam try in which partner has no last train or when he will have a last train, and the importance of having a better hand for your slam try if partner will have a last train. And that to me seems to come up over and over in slam bidding.
Better hand if they do have last train available.
No, if they
Okay.
don't.
Okay.
Right. It's sort of obvious when you think about it, but it's something that you have to think about.
Absolutely.
Or another thing in slam bidding, which also seems to come up a lot. So you've had some auction in which you've decided to bid slam. Maybe you bid Blackwood, maybe even Q bidding. It's whatever you've been doing. You should always be thinking at the end, should I offer an alternative suit? And it seems it's so often, even when you wouldn't expect it, that it's really there's a different eight card fit, which is going to be more solid or it'll offer a discard. And obviously, a lot of times it's not, or obviously it really can't be. But like, I have a bidding checklist and I have a defensive checklist, and that's really on my bidding checklist.
What else is on the bidding checklist and the defensive checklist? I'm just going to pick your brain.
Okay. So in the slam bidding, I always count my key cards twice. And Mike Becker used to have this saying, the auction slows up and once you're over the four levels. So I make sure I've counted my key cards correctly. Also, we play a bunch of double key card auctions. And I also ask myself, is this a double key card auction? And am I sure either way? In fact, a tournament or two ago, Chip said, "So how come you didn't respond to double key card? That was a double key card auction." I said, well, then we have to change our methods because that's just too obscure. Now, it actually wasn't a double key card auction, and he looked it up, and it wasn't. But I also think that that's an example of even if you're supposed to know what an agreement is, in the heat of the battle, if an auction sounds one way and it hardly ever comes up, that's going to be easy to mess it up. It sounds like one thing, it never comes up. You're going to be bidding, you're thinking about all sorts of things. And if hearts mean spades in that auction, that's really. So on defense, I always think third hand on defense. And I also look at the dummy and I see, are there any deceptive plays that I'm supposed to be making either at trick two or later in the hand? And
That's the
that's,
first thing you think about is deceptive plays.
I mean, after I decide if I'm going to win trick one or whatever, but I never played a trick one before doing sort of what I'll call pattern recognition and looking for deceptive plays. Because I don't expect myself to be able to figure out a new one, but there's just deceptive card play combinations, which in theory everyone is supposed to know, and I just look for those. So I also think, is there something which declare it is going to play off the dummy, which I have to duck or not duck smoothly? I mean, it's not supposed to be a surprise when he or she does that. And also, I try to ask myself before I play the first trick, do I really know what's going on in this hand? Like, what's this hand about? If it's no trump, has partner let our long suit? Has he let a short suit? Am I supposed to return it? Am I trying to keep Declara out of dummy? Like, and what's the point of this hand? And often I don't figure that out very effectively, but at least I ask myself. So
How much do you think it's bridge skill and knowledge and experience that differentiates people? And how much do you think it's at the table, focus, consistency, just getting the best out of yourself?
I think it's a lot more in getting the best out of yourself. And I think that there's a lot of stuff and how much sleep are you getting? Are you eating the right stuff? How focused are you at the table? Like also I really think you should not watch when partner plays the hand when you're dummy. I think it's a waste of energy and it could be much more productively spent doing basically anything else in the world. I tend to just base out, or particularly if I'm playing poorly, to get myself in the mindset of, okay, I'm going to play well in the next hand. I'll play well for the next of the set. Things haven't gone well. It doesn't matter. Every hand is new. You can play well. You've beaten these guys before. You can do it again. And maybe there are some players who are so imbued with massive self-confidence they don't have to do any of that stuff, but I do.
If you're playing someone you don't know, is there anything to like watching them defend and scouting a little bit? It's like, ooh, he didn't give it on his count there.
I'm sure it's good if you have unlimited pools of energy, but I don't have that. I mean, I might do that while watching View Graph, but it's like when I'm dummy, that's my time to get myself ready for the next hand.
So what do you do at a tournament to get to the table at your very best?
I try to get enough sleep. That's very important. I exercise it in the morning. I'm assuming I'm not playing the first set, which I hardly ever do because I'm not a morning person. I try to make sure I've eaten early enough so by the time I'm going to play, I'm not really digesting food. When I was a much less experienced player, but I was playing in an important match, I would play a meditation tape before every set. I don't really do that much anymore because I'm not as nervous as I used to be. But in general, it helps to clear my head. Also, by the way, I'll go back to being dummy for a moment. I think the most important thing, which I should have mentioned, is to work on getting yourself, either while you're dummy or otherwise, but it's the easiest when dummy, forgetting about the last hand, in which you screwed up or your partner screwed up or whatever. I mean, everybody knows this, but zillions of imps have been lost by people thinking about the last hand, and I'm certainly guilty of it myself. But I think that's something that everyone except for Bob Hammond has to improve on. From what I can tell, he's never let the prior hand affect him in 70 years of bridge. But I mean, and there's lots of ways to do it, but hardly anyone worries about it. But I do.
So what do you proactively do after a bad result to get over it?
If I'm dummy, particularly soon, I do what I call the balloon exercise.
Okay.
It's from a book called Thinking Body, Dancing Mind, which Joanna Stansby introduced me to. And it's written by a guy who's a combination, a business coach and an athletic coach. And it's a visualization exercise in which you put your bad hand in a balloon and you picture the balloon floating away. And that gets the hand out of my mind. Or I do other visualizations also when I'm dummy, or occasionally, and this is more so when I was a much less experienced player, before a set in which I would picture people coming up to me afterwards and saying, "Oh boy, you played really well. That was a great win. You were terrific there." So I'm a player who does not have an unlimited reservoir of self-confidence. So I try to build myself up.
If you're waiting till you're dummy, like that could be a couple hands, or at the very least, it's an auction
Yeah,
after.
for sure. And then you have to do something simpler. And if you have to, get up and wash your face. The only thing I don't like about the format that we have in the US trials, which I really think is the best bridge in the world on the tablets and everything, is you can't say to your partner, "Let's go to the bathroom," when you know he needs a break. Even if you don't, I mean, you can get up and obviously, and he'll just be sitting there, but I don't think it's as good.
To what extent do you consider being a good partner a skill, and what have you done over your career to get better at that?
So, look, I think it's a great skill. Are people who say to me, "Oh, I shouldn't have to do anything to get my partner to do well," but I think that's just absurd because all the mistakes he or she makes count against you as much as your own. Like a lot of young players, I was not a good partner. In fact, in the first event that I had a chance to do well in, my partner made some bid which I knew was a disaster. And instead of putting the dummy down, I just hurled my cards across the table at him. But I don't know. Don't think at bridge, except for the rare situation. I'm not a generally angry person. I view my partner as someone who's trying and who's also has come prepared to the tournament, and we've been doing all this practice. And so anyway, when he messes up, he messes up. So I don't yell at him or something like that. Once in a great while that happens, but it's probably a once a year thing. I know other people just don't have that personality trait. I mean, Chip, who really knows a lot, and I think, oh well, he messed that up, particularly in bidding, but maybe he knows something I don't know, and maybe I should think about that hand more or whatever. So now, in card play, if they make the wrong play in a two-card end position, obviously that's a painful thing. But I don't know, it's one of those things. I don't feel naturally angry at them. I just feel like let's go on to the next hand and let's hope it doesn't affect the next hand. So I really do think, with all due modesty, that I'm a model partner. I really do not get angry and I try to be supportive.
And then what do you guys do between tournaments to stay sharp?
So we go over all the hands from the last tournament.
When does that happen?
Usually starts about a week after the tournament, maybe a week and a half. Tip is retired, but I still work. So, I often have a bunch of work I have to catch up on, and I want to decompress some. And then we go over all the hands that we've played on Viewgraph, all the hands our teammates have played on Viewgraph. It's one of the advantages of doing well in some of these things that a lot of Viewgraph hands to do. So we go over, essentially almost every card of every hand. And then after that, we bid hands ourselves. And I think that both of us try to look at problems from books just to get ourselves in the card play mode. I pick up Killing Defense or something like that, or Advanced Play at Bridge or something, and I try to solve the problems. And when I don't, I think, okay, well, hopefully at the tournament I'll be able to solve some of these. But he and I never play together between tournaments. We're on different coasts, and occasionally I'll play in a regional with a friend of mine, Adam Wildowski or something like that. But I don't really play much between tournaments. I have a wife who doesn't play bridge. I still work probably the equivalent of half time. I just have a lot of other things to do.
Do you play it all online?
I would like to play online, but Sip thinks it's not a productive use of our time.
Really? Why is that?
He thinks it's too much unlike bridge at the table. I don't really see why, but he doesn't like to do it, so we don't do it.
Interesting. So when you show up for the first hand, do you feel at all rusty?
I do, but he doesn't. He's one of those people you can just wake up in the middle of the night and he'd be sharp. So I always play in something before I play in the main event with him. Either I'll play in a pair event or we'll arrange some team match against some other team or or something like that. I do not feel you can wake me up in the middle of the night and I'll be sharp.
So in the couple weeks before a big event, nationals or whatever, how does your preparation change?
I would say at some point we stop bidding hands and we just try to learn our notes. And any big changes to the notes we'd have made already. In the last 2 weeks, we don't make big changes in the notes, but we still tweak stuff to make it a little clearer. I read the notes, and then in the notes are some things in yellow, which are particularly important to me. And then there's a list of auctions at the end called Marty to remember. And those are unusual and also sort of artificial and complex sequences, which I have to read before every tournament. And also, we have something that I've recommended to a lot of people. No one's ever done it. It comes from what Chip and Lou used to do. We have a change sheet, and
Mhm.
it's a list of all the changes. That is the most valuable thing in our notes. Because if it hasn't changed in a couple of years, I probably know it. But the changes are like, boy, did we really change that? I don't remember that at all. So between the change sheets, everything in yellow, and the Marty to remember, that about exhausts the things I'm likely to screw up.
And then during the event, how much do you look at the notes? Like before a session, do you have a cheat sheet or anything?
No, no. I only look at the notes when I want to confirm that I'm right and he's wrong about something. Other than that, in general, by the time the tournament starts, I've learned everything I'm supposed to know.
So my goal for the year is about figuring out what it would look like to really put together a dedicated regimen to get better at bridge.
Hmm.
And so if I came to you looking for advice, I said, Marty, what should I do? I'm willing to spend 40 hours a week. How should I spend those 40 hours?
Right.
What would you say?
All right. So I think a couple of things. There's this ongoing discussion among people about what's more important, hitting or card play. And my friend Artosh Hans, he talks to his team about this, and they all think it's bidding. So he says, "Well, how come when we play Zimmerman and we lose 80 imps in the card play, you still think it's bidding?" So what I think is card play is more important. It's way harder to get better in card play. I don't know what you would do to get better in card play. The reason that card play is more important is that all these bidding edges and things you learn on the whole are what I call percentage things. They give you a couple of imps of edge on a hand. You know when to balance better versus not, or try for game or not, or do this or do that. But except for the occasional slam hand or something, and most of these things give you a slight edge. But people, even the best players, throw away tricks all the time. Over tricks, under tricks, particularly vulnerable under tricks. That's three imps. You have to be really good at bidding to give yourself a three imp edge in the bidding, I think. On an expectation basis, obviously you might win or lose 10 on any particular hand. I think it's just hard to get better at card play other than to read books. I just don't know what you would do. Bidding, you can actually learn stuff though. The really top players know more about card play and bidding than I do and are better at it, but I think that the card play is something that they're more or less born with. I think that what you should do is to work on bidding, and that would involve both talking to people to the extent that they'll talk to you about hands, but also just watching lots and lots of UGraph matches and seeing how the best bidders bid.
Mm.
And I think you can learn a lot from doing that, even with no commentary, whatever. Just think about who the best bidders are and just watch what they do. I think you would really learn a lot from them.
Do you go back and study old ViewGraph
Yeah.
matches?
Yeah. I mean, I don't do it on a regular basis, but I do it sometimes, particularly when uh, I feel rusty. I go back and onto BBO and I look at some old match.
Who are some of your go-tos to watch?
I like watching old Mextroff and Rodwell bidding. I feel that they really taught the world how to bid.
Even though their system is so different from yours, it's still
Oh,
benefit.
yeah. Yeah. I think that they invented modern bidding. I don't think anyone knew how to bid before them. I mean, there are people who knew some things, but not the way that they did it.
Do you use that for scouting at all?
I do to some degree. Like we find ourselves playing Zimmerman at every tournament. So I both have played a lot of boards against them, but I probably looked at every ViewGraph match that that team has played over the past several years. So because I want to be prepared, other team, I mean, I played the nickel team a lot, so I sort of know a lot of what they do. But once I'm out of a tournament, I love watching ViewGraph. I mean, I hate having lost, but I love watching ViewGraph. It's really an amazing, interesting, and fun thing to do.
I've been doing a lot of things during this experiment, and that's been the most fulfilling so far. Is just I've been looking at Steve and just going through last year's trials and every card he played, every bid he made.
At Steve Weinstein?
Yeah, and he'll answer questions for me, right? I can say, "Why on earth did you do this?" And there's always a reason,
There's
right?
always a reason.
It's very rarely, "Oh, I just took the hand off." It's basically never that.
That there's a hand from when he was on my team, which he says this hand is just like nothing, but I've never forgotten it. He opened a no trump, and the guy on his side of the screen passed, and Bobby bid four diamonds, Texas. This guy passed. He bid four hearts, pass, and the screen was over there a long time, and it came back all pass. And the opening lead was made. Bobby had some normal hand at 10 points and six hearts. So he realized this guy must have been thinking, and it wasn't over there that long, but he picked up the hesitation. This guy must be thinking he's surely short in hearts, so I'm going to finesse his partner for the queen of hearts and play him for a singleton. And that all worked, and we won a game swing. And to me, that was just the greatest thing. And he said, well, of course. I said, well, I don't know. I wouldn't have seen it at the time. And now I think about things like that. But someone like Steve or Bobby, I mean, they know a lot of things. I think that that's experience, but also just paying attention.
Yeah.
And paying attention is hard. I learned something like that from Kit Woolsey, where he's big on paying attention to I mean, I don't think he uses the phrase, the emotional resonance at the table. So trying to judge how your opponents feel, particularly as your declarer. So there's a hand that he told me about, and a very short time later, I had a very similar situation where I had ace 10 third in dummy, and I had king jack third in my hand in the last three tricks. And I decided that I was going to play my left hand opponent for the queen. I don't know why. I figured out it was 3-2, or maybe it was 3-3, whatever it was. And so I led low off to dummy, intending to play the king and finesse him for it. This guy followed. But he seemed happy to me, like a guy who was relieved. He knew I was trying to guess the queen also, and so I played the jack for my hand, and it was right. So I wouldn't have figured that out without Kit.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm still going to learn things from other people, even people who know less than I do. They often know stuff that I don't. So it's not like a continuous function where there's a bunch of stuff to know, and the people who are better than you know everything that you know and a bunch of other things. So,
Yeah, there's always more to learn.
yeah, and different stuff to learn.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been fantastic. I got a lot out of this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you asking me to be on this. Bye.
Yeah. All right. Bye.